What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Muse podcast. We are talking some of our favorite bets for the 2021 NFL season. It is right around the corner, man. I'm excited to talk about it, and I decided to bring on a very, very special guest today, ESPN's own David Bearman. David, how you doing today, man?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here, and I can't believe the NFL season is about to start. And I mean, there was NFL games on TV last night that anybody was watching because we're all watching the Field of Dreams, which was pretty awesome. Dolphins play tomorrow, 1:00, and then it's go time.
No, I mean, I love it. It's almost like, the first cut of grass in spring where you're like, man, it's nice weather again. That's exactly how I feel with like preseason football. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's around the corner, right? Regular season football is just right there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that I work with or associate with that will pick off preseason football as one of the easier markets to actually bet. I'm just not there yet. Like it's just when you find out the Rams aren't playing 35 players and you don't really know what, but people find an edge there, and I totally respect that because there are definitely areas where I find edges. Like I love betting the XFL and Korean baseball because not as many people do it, so you find edges. And I guess I'm so into football that practice football just doesn't do it. But to each his own.
No, and I love that. And kind of speak about it. I said you're from ESPN. You're somebody that's been in the betting market as far as been running this show for a while. Kind of tell a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've been at ESPN for 16 years. Prior to ESPN, I worked in major and minor league baseball, doing the broadcast and PR thing and everything else that comes with working in minor and major league baseball. Spent a lot of time with the Florida Marlins during their World Series runs and their affiliates. Worked for their single A and triple A team as well. Came to ESPN in 2005 in our stats and information department, pretty much as a content stats researcher. I supplied stats information for all of the live shows in Bristol and as well on the road. Went and traveled on the road with a lot of our college football content, bowl games, as well as became the golf researcher, which is why you see a lot of golf stuff on my Twitter account. Did golf for 4 years before working my way into management. And then there was a little team that we put together at ESPN to start pushing sports betting content about 6-7 years ago. And as you might imagine, nobody was listening because it was legal in one state way out west. And it was taboo to everybody else. So you had a lot of tongue-in-cheek mentions and a lot of, we can't really talk gambling. I guess that last score meant something somewhere in the desert. And little by little, we broke down a lot of barriers, hoping and that the Supreme Court would overturn PASPA in 2018, which they eventually did, which was really the green light and the switch that opened it up for everybody. Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania immediately went legal. And then, I work for ESPN, whose parent company is Disney. So obviously they're going to take a long look at it and say, what can we do here under the Mickey Mouse umbrella? And eventually I worked on a pilot for Daily Wager, putting together a pilot show, just like you would a sitcom, sent it to the powers that be, excuse me, and they greenlit Daily Wager to launch in March of 2019 and helped put that together before transitioning away from our stats team onto the digital side to oversee ESPN Chalk. So anybody who's been to ESPN Chalk is our sports betting website for ESPN, and I oversee that directly and work with our Daily Wager talent every day. And there's a lot more things that we're going to do that I can't necessarily speak to, but we are growing on a daily basis our sports betting content and happy to be a strong part of it and looking forward to doing more and more in the future. I don't know if anybody saw the wild card game that was on ABC and ESPN last year. We had a betcast on ESPN Plus, and we're hoping to do that this year for a couple of NFL games that are on our air, as well as we did some NBA ones. And, starting in 2021-22 season, we have the rights to PGA Tour Live. So you'll be seeing a lot more of golf betting content out there because of the fact that we own the rights to that as well.
No, and I love that. And I was actually kind of thinking about this the other day because I'm thinking about, placing my season bets and whatnot. And I was like, man, just a few years ago, like I was doing this, under the table illegally, some betting. So it's funny. Like it's crazy how much things have changed over the past few years as far as the betting market. Again, guys, we were talking, MVP, defensive player of the year, rookies of the year, overs and unders, playoffs. So we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but we're going to start off with some team over and unders that we like, that we think we saw value in. David, you want to kick it off with one of your first teams?
Yeah, one of the first teams I was looking at, and I have a lot of friends who like this team that are probably going to be listening. So my apologies in advance, but you never apologize for liking a team or disliking a team. But you look at the Atlanta Falcons and their total is 7.5, and I just don't see 8 wins on the schedule. Do I think they're going to be better than they were last year? You could argue they would be, although they did lose Julio Jones. But they're not going to be as bad. I mean, they lost a lot of one-score games last year. Every week you looked for that train wreck of the Falcons in the fourth quarter. You had the onside kick with Dallas, and you had a couple of the other blown leads. Like, there's regression to the means. The Falcons are not going to go 1-7 in one-score games. They're going to win some more. But if you look at the Falcons' overall talent, body of work, and who they have, I just don't see 8 wins on their schedule. Sure, I think they can beat Philly week 1. You got the Giants and the Jets on there, and you have a couple of other winnable games against Jacksonville and Detroit. So those are 5 games that I deem winnable, but you still got to get 3 more. You got Tampa, Washington's maybe pickable. They're at Miami, Carolina, the Saints, Dallas, New England, Tampa twice. I just don't see 8 wins there. Now, they could go 8-10. There is 8-9. There is 17 games this year, which is kind of throwing us for a loop when it comes to these over-unders. The other night when I was studying this for this pod, I had to keep reminding myself there is a 17th game. So 8 wins is not 8-8. 8 wins could be 8-9. So there is that element to it. I just don't see the Falcons as a team that's going to be a 500 team, and that's what you're going to have to be 8-9 to hit that one.
Yeah, it is going to be weird with the 17th game as far as like overs and unders for even just player props and for team wins, because I don't know, like you feel like it's going to skew one way or the other. It's either going to help the bettors or it's going to help the house. So it is going to be interesting how that plays out. But I'm with you, man. As far as, I don't mind Mike Davis, but if he's your featured back, makes you a little bit one-dimensional. The offensive line's not their strength per se. The defense we saw last year, really got ripped apart. I do think it's improved this year, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't see the 8 wins coming. The first team,
they're not. It's not that they're a bad team.
No.
I know they finished. I mean, they got the 4th overall pick. You got Kyle Pitts. They were not as bad as the 4th worst team in the league last year. They were better than that. Yes. And they're going to win more than they did last year. But I'm with you. Mike Davis is not your feature back. You lost Julio Jones. Matt Ryan, another year older. Mm-hmm. I just think the Falcons, they missed their window. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Granted, they were, 3 minutes away from a Super Bowl win. But that was their window. And then the few years afterwards, they didn't get it done, which was your typical Super Bowl hangover. I just think we're out of that Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley era, Devontae Freeman and all that. That's gone. It's over. They're starting from scratch, and you still have Matt Ryan, but I think you're going to have to start thinking about a rebuild. And you do got Kyle Pitts. I think that's going to make the offense a lot more dynamic. Calvin Ridley's great. He'll probably have an all-pro year. I know we'll talk about wide receivers later. I don't see them getting 8 wins.
Yeah, in football more than any other sport, you have windows because of the salary cap issues, especially with quarterback contracts and whatnot. And once you miss that window, a lot of teams try to kind of grasp onto it and they try to hang around. That's what we kind of seen from Atlanta over the past few years. A team that I think is right at their window, trying to make that run is the Tennessee Titans. Their over and under right now is 9 wins. I'm saying it's over. And not only Tennessee's defense is questionable. I do think Mike Vrabel is a very good defensive coach where you can kind of coach them up a little bit to get them play past maybe what their talent is. But their offense, looking at it when the season ended, it was super high powered, right? But they were missing the number 2 guy, especially with losing to Corey Davis. So they go out and get Julio Jones to play opposite of AJ Brown. So I like their talent, but more than that, it's just the division. We see the Colts are already beat up, and they're by far the number 2 team in that division. The Jaguars are extremely young. The Houston Texans might be the worst professional, team in sports right now, as far as how it's ran, what kind of state they're in. So they're in a little bit of a difficult situation. So that's why, mainly why I'm saying the Titans are over 9 wins. Those odds right there are -140, and I kind of feel like that's free money, to be honest.
I do like that one. I think worst case scenario at 9 and 8, you get a push, and this is one of those that you have to shop for, because there are some shops that have 9.5 at more even money. I think 9 -140 is definitely a better bet than 9.5 at even. And some people wouldn't want to pay the 40 cents juice, but you're looking at 40 cents juice to ensure yourself a push at worse. Because you're right, that division stinks. You look at Jags and Houston, that should be 4 wins right there. And the only thing that scares me about this one, and I do think you're spot on, and I would play it at 9 at minus 140, is if you had asked me a week ago, I probably would have said, like, put the house on it, because the Colts it looked like Wentz was going to be out and this and that and Nelson, and that sort of reversed this week. It looks like that was overblown. You had Adam Schefter and Mortensen reporting this week that Wentz should be back by week 1, and that Nelson could be back as well. So they're not in as dire straits as we might have thought a week ago. And I still think, like, the Colts are going to be a factor there. I went and I was handicapping that division the other night, and I know you like the Titans, and I think the Titans should win it. But the team that was, in the AFC Championship game recently, and you have a quarterback who didn't get what he should have gotten in Miami. And I think Tannehill is good enough to lead his team to a Super Bowl and at least 10 wins. I mean, he actually led his team to 10 wins in Miami with far worse talent.
Sure.
You got the best running back in football. You got arguably the best wide receiver in football, and AJ Brown. So you have an offense, and like you said, Vrabel on defense. The Titans, to me, are a dark horse to win the AFC. I don't think they're as good as Kansas City. I don't think they're as good as Buffalo. But they are 2 years removed from an AFC Championship game where they're an extremely good team. And I'm actually surprised to see that you can still hang some 9s out there, because if the Tennessee Titans can't get 10 wins with that offense, then Vrabel's doing something wrong. You got a quarterback that isn't going to make mistakes, that can always hand it to a 2,000-yard running back and 2 all-pro wide receivers, with a decent defense and a division that has Houston and Indianapolis. That's a team that could sneakily show up, and all of a sudden you're like, damn, 13-4. Why didn't I see that? It still can't get used to 13-4, 14-3. We'll have to get used to that. But if the Tennessee Titans went 13-4, you'd be like, shoot, why didn't I see 9 minus 140? What is more likely? And I would ask people, what's more likely for me to say to you in January? The Titans are 13-4, or that are 8-9?
Yeah.
Like you would pick 13-4 before you picked 8-9, and you can bet better than 8-9 right there in front of you and get a push. So I do like that one.
No, and that's exactly how I feel. I'm completely with you on that one. What is your next team?
The other one that is a big shopping one, because when I looked on one website, I saw 8.5 and said, I'm not going to do it. Just like the Titans won at 9.5. But then I saw a different website. I saw the Arizona Cardinals at 8 minus 140, same juice as the Titans. The Cardinals won 8 games last year with an end of season collapse that cost them a playoff spot. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, great little 1-2 combo there. They're only going to get better. They won 8 games last year. They should be better. They actually should have won 10 games last year. You look at the way they lost to the Dolphins, the way they lost down the stretch. That was a team that was on pace for 10 wins. Wound up with 8. They were better than an 8-win team. They're better this year, and they get another game. So I don't see the Cardinals doing 8-9. 8-9 is a push, by the way, unlike the Titans bet where you got to get to 9. If the Cardinals are 8-9, it's a bad season and you still get your money back. I would probably not take this at 8.5 because they could be 8-9. But it's a very tough division. That's really the only thing that scares me is you got 4 teams that legitimately are playoff contenders. And you're going to see one of my surprise picks for the divisions later is going to be the Arizona Cardinals because of the value you can get on them at 6-1. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm not totally sold on, Matt Stafford's Matt Stafford. Like, I don't know why everyone thought the Cardinals traded for, a Hall of Fame quarterback. And there's still the Rams. Great defense. Offense has struggled. You just lost your running back. San Francisco, everybody thinks is going back to the Super Bowl like they were 2 years ago. People forget that they just drafted a rookie quarterback who hasn't played in 2 years because they don't believe in Jimmy G. So all of a sudden people think that San Francisco is going to reincarnate to what they did 2 years ago when they overplayed their hand 2 years ago. And Seattle. You never bet against Russell Wilson, but that's all really they have there. So I think the Cardinals can pick a few off and get to 500. We can talk more about the division in a bit.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you on that. The only thing that scares me is exactly that division. I mean, they could have a good year and still go 0-6 in the division. Like, that's how good the teams that they're playing are. So that NFC West, I just finished up my NFL previews. I'm trying not to bet in that division just because it's so, like, you have no idea. I mean, Trey Lance, he's getting rave reviews right now, but he's still a rookie. But then you go back to we saw what Kyle Shanahan did with RG3 in Washington, and you're like, oh, maybe it will be kind of something similar, but he throws the ball a little bit better with more talent around him. I have no idea. It is crazy, but I do like that value as far as Arizona goes. I'm going to go to another team that I just think that we're underplaying a little bit, and they end up making the playoffs last year, is the Washington Professional Football Team. They're a team that has a scary, scary defense. And the one thing when I was looking at this, they're set at 8.5 is what I wrote down, and the odds are -110. So when I look at this is last year I was on Denver, and clearly I was wrong. But I looked at it and, I thought they had a strong defense, and I thought they had a ton of firepower on offense. But the biggest thing is they had a question mark at quarterback. Okay. Now I'm not saying Ryan Fitzpatrick is, he's awesome. No, what I'm saying is he is a question mark because he'll have games where he'll throw for 403 touchdowns, and he'll have games where he throws for 250 and 4 picks. He's a little bit of a wild card. But the thing is, we know for sure is that defense. That defense is going to keep the score low, and it allows the offense to get more chances, and it allows them to get out of trouble if Ryan Fitzpatrick throws a pick or two. I like Antonio Gibson. I mean, we didn't even see him being used on third downs last year. And when he got drafted, let's not forget, people didn't know if he was going to be a running back in the NFL. People thought he was going to be a receiver. So he's already got the hard part of the job down. He's a very, very talented running back. I think he's very talented coming out of the backfield. They finally got someone opposite of McLaurin with Curtis Samuel. Logan Thomas came up big last year. So I just like this team at 8.5. We again, how we talked about the NFC West being killer, the NFC East is not. Philly could be bad. Dallas, we think is going to be good, but now Dak's getting another MRI. I'm kind of worried about that. The New York Giants are, they are what they are. They're decent on paper, but they have a question mark at quarterback. So that's why I like Washington at 8.5. And I like them. We'll talk about that when we talk about division winners. I think there's value there.
Yeah, that's one of the divisions where if you actually think 9 wins is going to win the division, then that's a good bet. Or the fact if you're going to go away from the whatever weird pattern that the NFC East has had a different winner every single year for the last billion years, and Washington won it last year. Can they win it again? Those are the type of stats that you look at and you just roll your eyes at. For whatever coincidence, it's the same team every year. It's a different team every year. If you do think that 9 wins is going to win the division, then I think that's a very good bet, because you're right. You look at that division as a whole, and you almost take out the Eagles and the Giants, because they're just not going to win it, even though they came close last year. Washington has improved. I still think Dallas is the best team on paper in the division if Dak is healthy, but we don't know that. And that's going to be one of those divisions where you're scared of the NFC West because how good it is. I'm scared of the NFC East because of how crappy it is. But I do think people are underestimating how good Washington can be. And I mean, you hit it on the head right at the beginning. And if you look at the wall behind me, I had a front row seat for that Ryan Fitzpatrick roller coaster each of the last 2 years. And I have nothing but, respect for Ryan. And I hope he does well there. And I think that is kind of what they need to get over the hump. And you're basically asking them to do what they did last year, win 9 games and win the division, which they absolutely could do. And it is a bet that, we'll probably get to in a bit that I don't mind taking with that one.
No, absolutely. I mean, the fact that they were there with a shell of Alex Smith at quarterback, I mean, they just upgraded across the roster. So I like it. I like it. But
and I know it was an underrated story last year, but if we're going to go back 10 years from now and see what Alex Smith did in Washington as one of the most unreal comebacks. I know he won comeback play of the year and got all the awards at the ESPYs and everything else, but to bring his team back to the playoffs after what he went through, granted they won 9 games and it wasn't a big story because there were other teams with 13 and 14 wins and it was a crappy division. Even though it was a crappy division, Alex Smith, who almost lost his leg 2 years earlier, led a team to the playoffs and to a win. So great,
good for that guy. Good for that guy.
Yeah.
Go ahead and give me one more before we move on, as far as team over and unders.
Sure, there were a couple of more I was looking at. I won't give it as the next play, but I don't think the Jags win 7 games. All due respect to Urban Meyer, you're asking a team to go from 1 or 2 wins to 7 overnight, and he's never coached in the NFL. And it's always one of those dream scenarios where you got the best coach in college football is going to lead you to 15 wins. I had Nick Saban in my backyard, and it didn't happen. I had Jimmy Johnson in my backyard. It didn't happen. You've seen Pete Carroll. The first time it didn't happen. So be careful what you wish for. It might work eventually. I don't think they get to 7. But the next pick I want to bring up is the Carolina Panthers, same division as the Falcons. It's 7.5. And I think this is a tricky one because if you look, this is one that I literally predicate totally based on the schedule. Do I think the Carolina Panthers are an 8-win team? Maybe. McCaffrey's back. They got two different options at quarterback. They got a great head coach. Maybe they're an 8-win team, but look at the schedule. They open up with the Jets at home, the Saints, who are going the wrong direction, at home, at Houston. You get a tough one at Dallas. Not it's winnable, but it's obviously the hardest of the four. Philly at home, Minnesota at home, Giants, and Atlanta. Those are your first 8 games of the season. There's 6 wins, if not 7 there. Now, they're not going to win them all. They go 4-4. 4-4 is still halfway home to 8, by the way. I see like 6 wins there, and the schedule does get tougher. I mean, it's a brutal stretch at the end. You got Buffalo, Tampa, New Orleans. Tampa is your finish. So it's a tough one. But you also get a 500 Patriots team, a 500 Washington team, a 500 Miami team, and we're talking about a 500 Arizona team. So that's the middle of the schedule. So I gave you the first 8. Then I gave you New England, Arizona, Washington, Miami are not necessarily the easiest games, but they're winnable. It's not like any of them scare you. You get Atlanta again, and then your gauntlet of at Buffalo versus Tampa, at New Orleans, at Tampa's tough. You've seen this before when teams that look at the Carolina Panthers that went to the Super Bowl and lost to Denver. Nobody expected that team to win the NFC under Cam Newton, but they started off like a 9-0 and rode that to a 15-1 record in a Super Bowl berth. No one saw that coming. They were a 500 team at best that year. When teams get off the hot starts, things start happening. I'm not predicting the Carolina Panthers to go to the Super Bowl, but if the Panthers get off to a 6-2 start with that easy schedule, do you not think they can win 3 more games over the next 9 against teams like Washington, Miami, Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta? I just think the schedule sets up more than I think of the team. This is a total look at the schedule, get off to a hot start, maybe ride it to 10 wins by accident, get waxed in the playoffs, but you hit the 7.5. We're only asking for 8 wins. Yeah. And I think this schedule has 8 wins. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be 8-0, but all 8 of those games are winnable to start the season.
And like you said, it's like a snowball effect, right? The ball starts getting rolling. You have a young team, you start to believe a little bit. And I think an underrated thing right there is when you're playing Tampa Bay late in the year, they could have the division wrapped up. They could have the number 1 seed wrapped up, and they sit, a Tom Brady, they sit Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So that could be another freebie win late in the season where it's just, they're packing things up and they're looking for another Super Bowl win. So I'm completely with you on that one. I'll give 2 ones real quick is Patriots are 9.5 wins. I'm going under on that. I think they're in a tougher division. Buffalo's one of the best teams. I think they can compete with the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are still the cream of the crop right in the AFC, but I think the Bills are a clear number 2. I like Miami. I believe in Tua, and even if Tua is not fantastic, we don't see Bama Tua. I think there's a lot of talent around him that can help push him over the top, push this team over the top. And I think the Jets are improved. Overall, I know the Pats were kind of out in the media. They spent a lot of money this offseason. Guess what? Surprise, surprise, Hunter Henry's already hurt. Johnny Smith's never put up big stats. They got a lot of guys. They overpaid a lot of guys. Just the talent still, I don't think is great on offense. The defense is going to be much improved. That bringing back some guys that sat off in the COVID year. But overall, man, you still have a question mark at quarterback. Cam Newton is not the Cam Newton who won MVP. He's not the Cam Newton that took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. Mac Jones is a question mark.
Mac Jones won. He got his bust in the Hall of Fame last night. Did you not pay attention to Twitter? I literally thought Mac Jones got inducted last night. I'm like, the guy completed 5 passes for like 30 yards. What are we doing?
I mean, Tom Brady 2.0.
What are we doing? Like, I mean, I agree with you. And I'm not saying that just because I'm a big Dolphins guy. I think there needs to be the other side of the equation because everybody's big on the Pats this year. Everybody thinks, oh, you've got Mac Jones and they spent a lot of money, like you said. The division's tougher than you think. Buffalo is still the cream of the crop. The Dolphins aren't going away, and the Dolphins have had the Pats number in Miami.
Yes.
And they still should sweep the Jets. The schedule's easier than it has been because of the divisions that the AFC East plays. But for everybody to think that the Patriots are going to turn around and like do this again, and that it was just because they had a rough year with all their defensive guys out last year. Those guys also didn't play last year. And Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders was on with Doug Kazarian on one of his pods this week, and his math tells you that the Patriots are better than their win total based on the fact that they're returning more on defense than any team has returned in the last 30 years because they all sat out last year.
Yeah.
But they all sat out last year. Like, I don't know about you, but when I don't work for a whole year and athletically, like, I go back out and I'm not ready to go. So I'm not a professional athlete by any stretch. It's going to take some time. I don't know. I think 9.5 is a tough one. The number's probably right. I think you're getting some good value on the under there. And can I see the Patriots with 10 wins and a playoff berth? Yes. Sure. Can I see them go 9-8 and miss the playoffs like they did last year? Yeah. So that's a tough one, but I would lean towards your side on that one.
And then the last one I'm gonna throw out, this might be a little bit of a homer, but I think the Steelers do go over 8.5. Mike Tomlin's never finished under 500. Ben Roethlisberger, I know he slowed down in the year, later in the year, and I think that's partially a lot of the things that they started figuring out the Steelers offense is because they didn't change gears. They were hitting a lot of short passes. Ben Roethlisberger was getting rid of the ball in record time in the NFL, and then they didn't switch from it. They didn't deviate from the plan once teams started to figure it out. They have a new OC in town. Ben Roethlisberger is still going to be a Hall of Famer. When it's all said and done, he's going to be a top 5 in pretty much every statistical category for quarterbacks. They have firepower on offense. They got a new running back, and I think they're going to pound the bejesus out of Najee Harris. They have one of the top 3 defenses in the league. I do think the Browns are I think the Browns are going to win this division. I think the Browns are going to make some noise in the playoffs personally. I think the Ravens are probably a little overrated, but I still think they're probably better than the Steelers on paper. But it's tough for me not to see the Steelers, getting to 9 wins, 10 wins. I just think they're too veteran. They're too talented. I know everyone's worried about the offensive line. But they got, David Castro is gone, but they replaced him with a 5-time Pro Bowler, Trey Turner. Alejandro Villanueva, who's now in Baltimore, was just a dumpster fire last year, was getting beat by everybody and anybody. So I think the offensive line at worst case scenario is the same, but I think it's a little bit better. That's why I'm thinking they get to 9-10 wins.
I would always argue that it's never a homer pick when you know your own team, and you obviously know your own team. So I totally respect the call, regardless if it's your team or not, because you know them better than anybody. And I agree. Whenever you have a team that's anywhere near 500 in the win total, I will always rely on veteran coaches and a veteran team, especially in the COVID times where, you look at what the Lakers did a few years ago during COVID.
Sure.
You looked at some of the really, you can't really talk about Belichick and the Patriots because of how much they lost, but you have a veteran coach, a veteran team. They know how to win. They were not would they start 12-0 last year? They weren't as good as that team. Obviously bowed out early. I thought that was a little bit overrated. But they're also not an 8-9 team. Like, people forget that this Pittsburgh team was being talked about as going undefeated. By the way, only one team ever did. Pittsburgh went through a lot last year with having to play games on Tuesday and Wednesday and, all sorts of times. They handled it well. They were a veteran team. I love Najee Harris. That's who I wanted the Dolphins to take with their second first-round pick. Reasons that I don't understand. They didn't. But Pittsburgh grabbed him. He's a perfect Pittsburgh guy. And just like you're concerned about Arizona in the NFC West, I'm concerned about Pittsburgh in the AFC North because that is a very tough division. I 100% agree with you that Baltimore's a little bit overrated. I actually typed in the Ravens as one of my plays before I deleted it because it's tough to bet against that team. Yeah. They have some easy wins on there as well. But I don't think the Ravens are an 11-win team, and that's what the total was. I almost took the under there, but they seem to win 12 games every year, no matter what the case. And Cleveland's good. Like, Cleveland is the team that I have taken advantage of fading for the last 5 years when everybody thought Cleveland was ready and they weren't. And I faded them and faded them and faded them. I think I won the under on Cleveland like 3 straight years. They proved to me last year that they are here.
Yes.
They won a playoff game against Pittsburgh. They took Kansas City to the mat. They got better in the offseason. I think they have a really good coach, and I think Cleveland is here to stay. The Browns of old are gone. I'm still not declaring them AFC champs like everybody else is. That's a tough division. Pittsburgh is definitely better than Cincinnati, and I think they're on par with Cleveland. They should be able to scratch out 9 wins because at the end of the day, if you were just look at their schedule and say, all right, we're going to give them 6 wins and 6 losses, that leaves 5 more games. Mike Tomlin's going to win 3 out of 5 anytime you look at it.
That's exactly it. Completely with you. But yeah, you're right on those concerns about being a tough division. And even when you look at like a Cincinnati, who's clearly in the basement of that division, still not an easy win, man. One, division
They're
games are
better.
tough. One, or
Yeah.
division games are tough, and two, like anything can happen. Like when you have that kind of offense, they can hang 30 on you, in the first half, and you're like, what just happened? They're the talent offense. Now you're worried about Joe Burrow. His knee hasn't looked good in this training camp, but still, you just don't know with those basement teams. Like even like a Jets, they could be frisky this year. That's why, they could steal one from the Pats potentially.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and if you look at Pittsburgh, I know we talked about windows with other teams. Like the Ravens have a young quarterback and now a young running back. You got Jackson and Dobbins. Cleveland's obviously young. Cincinnati is young, getting better. Pittsburgh's got to be careful because
Yes.
their quarterback is 100 years old and their backup quarterback's not great and they're getting older. They're not getting younger like the other teams are. So Pittsburgh's kind of in a win now scenario where you don't know how much longer this is going to last. Maybe they can get young real quick and just recycle like other teams do. But their window is smaller than other teams in their division. When you think about how young the other three teams are, Baltimore's already there with young talent. They seem to reload real fast. Since he's taken the 25-year approach and Cleveland's taken the 50-year approach, but I think they're all getting better. And if I were to close my eyes and say, what's this division going to look like in 3 years? You might be in the cellar. So you better win now.
Sure. I'm 100% with you. And I like that. As far as I actually kind of like betting on this more than team over and unders, but to make playoffs. So we each wrote down a few teams. Started off with a team that you like to make or miss the playoffs.
And you and I are in agreement on a couple of these. And
Yes.
I'll start with the Saints. Like, I don't know what plan Sean Payton has working up there, but I'm not going into a season with, Jameis Winston is my quarterback or a wide receiver as my quarterback, thinking I'm going to make the playoffs. Your all-pro wide receiver who screwed my fantasy team over last year is now going to be, he's going to be MIA for a while. You're going to rely on, yes, Alvin Kamara was a stud last year. Is he really your 3-down back that you're going to pound the ball 400 times to when you don't have Thomas, you don't have Breeze? I'm very worried about what the Saints have. Their defense is getting older as well. The Saints might be one of those teams that it's like edge of the Super Bowl every single year, edge of this, edge of that, off the cliff. Would you be stunned to see they win 4 or 5 games and they're where the Falcons were last year, getting the number 4 overall pick, drafting that quarterback of the future or whatever? I could see that with the Saints. Yet they're favored to make the playoffs or minus 120. So it's almost a toss up. I think that's tremendous value because you look at the division and you know that the Panthers are getting better. The Saints were the cream of the crop, but the Super Bowl champs are in that division. So Tampa's going to win the division. I like the Panthers getting better. The Falcons will be better, not great. Like, where are the Saints going to factor in? And if you're thinking third, maybe fourth, 120 for them to miss is a hell of a bet. And I really, I saw you kicked off with that one. When I looked at it yesterday, I'm like, it's hard to argue that that's your favorite one as well.
Yeah, and I'm completely with it. This feels like a case where the bottom falls out of the box and you didn't even realize. I love the idea that they could be this year's Falcons. Sean Payton, tremendous coach, one of the best in the league. I don't know what he sees in Taysom Hill. Like, I get it. He's a fun gadget player. You want to get him, 5 touches a game and like a wildcat kind of thing. Fantastic. But the fact that like, I'm not like in love with Jameis Winston. He has tremendous talent, but the guy can't read a defense. But Jameis Winston should be the starter. But the thing that worries you is they don't have anybody to throw the ball to.
Nobody.
And it's the idea of like Drew Brees. I might throw a ball better than Drew Brees does right now today. His arm is gone, but he's still an absolute assassin pre-snap. And people forget about the old quarterbacks like a Tom Brady. Is like a lot of the stuff they do isn't just throwing the football. It is setting your team up to succeed pre-snap. And I think that's what they're gonna miss. They were still division winners last year, but a lot of that is Drew Brees. Yeah, he couldn't throw the ball 40 yards down the field, but he's just getting you into the right scenarios. Now you have Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. I don't know. I just don't see it. Being even money essentially at minus 120, I think it's a good value. There was another team that we agreed on as far as to make the playoffs, and we're both going the Miami Dolphins. I just like the Dolphins this year, man. And I mentioned it before. I like what they did on offense. They went all in on Tua. They got him talent around him. I personally would have gone Devontae Smith over Jalen Waddle, but I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to stretch the field. With a Will Fuller, a Waddle, you have Devontae Parker, you have Gesicki. Running back isn't great, but Gaskins did well last year. The defense is very, very strong. You saw Xavier Howard with 10 picks last year. So I like what Flores is doing, man. And I think he's one of those guys where I said last year, is this guy the best Belichick coaching tree guy you've ever seen? Vrabel's very, very good too, but this guy just changed the culture overnight in Miami. So I like this team to, win a wild card. I don't think they take the division, but I don't see how they miss a wild card spot.
I mean, last year they were on the cusp of it that no one saw coming. They won 10 games. They had a shot to make the playoffs going into week 17, got blown out by the Bills, which kind of showed you where the Dolphins actually were last year. And they overplayed the 10 wins. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to tell you they were a 10-win team. If you look at the stats, there is going to be some regression on defense. You're not going to expect Xavier Howard to get 10 picks again. Sure. The defense played above them, so I do expect a little bit of step back. But where I think the things have changed, and you can almost just hit play on the recorder for the amount of times I have repeated this exact same phrase. Like, you had people keep asking me all offseason, Tua, are you a believer? And my thing with Tua was 9 games as a rookie, no preseason, no training camp, coming off a possible career-ending hip injury. And above all else, if you take all that out of the equation, he was throwing to guys like me and you out there.
Yes.
Like Devontae Parker was at half capacity. Gesicki didn't get as great of a year as he thought. And if you actually look at the next-gen stats from the NFL, the wide receiver and tight end who got the least amount of separation at their respective positions were Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, who each had good years. But when you're talking about a rookie quarterback, they got the least amount of separation of wide receivers and tight ends. So when people said Tua doesn't have it in him, he keeps dinking and dunking and dinking and dunking, nobody was open.
Yeah.
And when Parker and Gesicki were hurt, which there was a couple of games that were both out, he was throwing to Jakeem Grant, who's as tall as me, and he was throwing to guys I've never heard of at tight end. So there was one time the Dolphins suited up and they won the game with offensive guys that nobody ever heard of. And you're talking about a rookie quarterback. So to me, Tua got an incomplete. He got an F to a lot of people, but he got an incomplete because 9 games, no training camp, bad offseason, but bad injury at Alabama, no preseason, and no weapons. You mentioned Jalen Waddle, Will Fuller, some more offensive linemen. Tua now has the weapons. He can throw downfield to Fuller, Waddle. He's got Gesicki, Devontae Parker, Preston Williams back from injury. He's got the weapons to get it done. Love what Flores has done there in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of making it the Patriots way down there. They won 10 games last year. I think 10 wins again is not out of the question. They have an easier schedule this year than last year. They should be able to qualify for a wild card spot, and you're getting plus value on it. I like what they're doing. The big question mark was, will Howard play? Howard was re-signed. He's in camp. As long as they can come close to what they did on defense last year, the offense will be better. And if you look at the AFC as a whole, you're really going to be, if you go ahead and say someone's obviously going to win the North, you're going to have the Colts and Titans battling in the South, give Buffalo the East. Kansas City's the only team worth a crap in the West. You have Miami, you have New England, and you probably have the AFC South runner-up battling for those 2 wild card spots, in my estimation.
And I'm completely with you. And I think a lot of people kind of talking about Tua real quick is, with the offense, it was set up for Ryan Fitzpatrick. It wasn't set up for Tua. And you could tell a lot of things that they did on offense is they didn't take the training wheels off of Tua. Now, I'm not saying he would have lit the world on fire last year, but they were very much playing him like a guy they're like, we don't want to get him hurt. So to me, I feel like they were almost like with a little kid just getting his feet wet. They're like, hey, this is the taste of the NFL. If you can do it, fantastic. But as soon as it kind of got tough, they're like, Ryan Fitzpatrick, get back in there. So it was very much of that. So I didn't really take too much of what I saw last year as a negative for Tua. I felt like it was more of like kind of go through the growing pains now and we'll be ready to roll next year. But like you said, they just didn't have the talent last year. What is your next team?
The next team that I like in terms of make or miss playoffs is the Vikings at minus 140. No, I don't really like them this year. Their defense was crap last year. I don't think they got any better. I'm not a believer in Kirk Cousins. I think the whole COVID thing, if it's going to hit any team in terms of political stuff, it's going to be the Vikings. You heard what Zimmer has said. I just, even though they're in a division that's just the Packers and nobody else, I'm not a fan of the Vikings. I don't think they have it in them to battle with the runner-up and third-place team in the West, because those are going to be, battling for the wild card, and or whoever doesn't come out of the South. There is that spot there, because if it's not 3 teams out of the West, I don't think you're going to get 2 teams out of the East, and I'm not sure you're going to get 2 teams out of the South. But I'm not even sure the Vikings are the second best team in their division, because they think the Bears are, even though I don't like the Bears, I think they are better than the Vikings. So I would give the Vikings at no. And the other one I wanted to throw out real quick, because we talked about them earlier, only because of the schedule. I think the fact that you're going to get plus 200 on the Carolina Panthers, who could, as I said, start out 6-2 or 7-1, getting plus 200. Again, the Panthers are not good enough to be a playoff team, but their schedule's set up. You get McCaffrey back. I think they can be a playoff team.
I love that, man. I agree with you 100% that I'm not sold the Vikings are better than the Bears, and I don't love either team. I think they're both like mediocrity at its apex. But like you said, the West is going to beat up on itself. And then you look at the East, not great. So the Panthers at plus 210, like I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but I just like the value, like the numbers there where I'm like, why not? Throw a few dollars down. If it happens, great, but you're not betting on it. You're not going, this is a sure thing right here. And the last team I'll throw out there, which I mentioned earlier, is I'm just all over this team. Either I'm gonna make a lot of money off this team or I'm gonna strike out swinging. Is the Washington Professional Football Team. They're plus 135. When they match up against the Cowboys, okay, so you're looking, that's their main competition. Their defense is their strong point, and their defense is elite, and the Cowboys' offense is their strong point, and it's elite. So let's just say those two things cancel out a little bit. Let's say the Cowboys win some, the Washington team they win some. Then you go to the other side of the ball. I like Washington's offense way more than I like Dallas's defense. So I think they can play them tough, and I just think they kind of have a team that knock them out, drag them around, kind of, muscle out a few wins more than the Cowboys can. And again, we go back to that Dak Prescott thing of just, we don't know. So, I'd rather kind of go with what I do know than the kind of unknown. So that's why, at plus odds 135, throw down a little bit of money. I like the chance of, even if it's not winning the division, I think they have a chance to make a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting plus 200 and then some to win a division, and plus money for them to get a wild card. And I think their way in is to win the division. I'd probably play your division bet before I played to make the playoff bet, because you're just getting better value. Sure. If they don't win the division, I think it's going to be tough to make it over the West teams, and potentially Carolina in the South. But it is good value and good money, because I think they potentially are the best team in that division.
And like you said, plus 230 to win the division, which we both kind of, we wrote down that we liked. What is another team you like to win a division? You like the odds?
Teams that I like to win a division, and I'm going to give one long shot and one obvious one. The Packers minus 160 might be the easiest bet. I know you have to lay 60 cents, but who's going to win that division if it's not the Packers? Yes. Assuming Aaron Rodgers is still straight up and healthy, and plays with them and doesn't somehow decide to change his mind, like the other 3 teams stink. So I think minus 160 on the Packers is as easy as it gets if you're okay laying that type of juice. And the other one I touched on earlier, it's a long shot, but to get plus 650 on a really talented Arizona Cardinals team, are they the best team in the West? No. But I think there are holes that people aren't recognizing out there because they're so in love with the Rams, the Niners, Seahawks. People forget that there's arguably the most talented team in the division is Arizona. When you look at them top to bottom with J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, really good talent there with a coach who seems to be figuring it out. I think without Akers, the Rams are not going to be as good as people think. I'm not a believer. I wasn't a believer in San Francisco when they won the NFC. They're not as good as that, but they're not as bad as they were last year when they got the overall number 3 pick. If you're relying on Trey Lance to be your quarterback or Jimmy Garoppolo, neither one of them has me sold as NFC West winner. And, Seattle's going the wrong direction, and they only have Russell Wilson. He can only do so much. So I think you're getting 650. It's a long shot. if you asked me who's going to win the division, I probably wouldn't say Arizona Cardinals, but the other three aren't getting you 650. This team is.
I absolutely love that. I love taking some of those long shot bets, like we talked about. It probably won't happen, but if it does, hey, why not? Why not throw a few dollars down, kind of see what happens? The other two
Keep some
teams,
money.
yeah, the other two teams I went with is I told you I'm all over the Cleveland Browns. What we saw from Baker in the end of the regular season into the playoffs. I mean, he was statistically advanced analytics, one of the most efficient quarterbacks, and we don't need him to, absolutely, be Patrick Mahomes. He can make those plays, but within Kevin Stefanski's offense, I think he fits that perfectly, man. That play action, I think he's an upgraded Kirk Cousins, and I think this team is a lot better than the Vikings ever were. I think this defense and its weaknesses, they really shirt him up. They got some absolute steals in the draft. They had one of my favorite drafts of any team. So I think at plus 150, I told you I thought the Ravens were, I don't know what happened to my camera. All right, so I don't know what happened to the camera, but yeah, I think the Ravens are, I could easily see them winning. That wouldn't surprise me. But I think plus 150, again, it's kind of much how I feel about the Washington professional football team. I think there's value there, and I like that. And then how you said the Packers, I don't know who's going to take it from them. Tennessee at minus 120. I get that people were on the Colts, but people are like, "Oh, Carson Wentz is going to come back sooner than we thought." He's still Carson Wentz. Like, we still don't know what we're going to get from Carson Wentz. I thought the defense kind of overperformed a little bit last year. They have Michael Pittman, and then T.Y. Hilton's kind of getting a little long in the tooth. Jonathan Taylor, I'm not a huge fan of. I think he's very, very good, but I think that tandem of running backs with Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines and Wilkins, I think they're really talented as a group more than I just like Jonathan Taylor overall. So I like that value. But like you said, I probably actually like the Packers at minus 160 more, or I think the Bills are minus 150. I think there's value there. Bill Simmons, who is my guy. Bill Simmons is one of my favorite dudes who does podcasts. I listen to all his stuff. Every year he talk about betting on the Patriots. No matter what, they'd be minus 300. He's like, it's free money. Just bet on it. It's free money. So that's how I feel with the Packers. It's free money. Just might as well take it.
I think there's only two divisions where, if you look across the spectrum of first place, second place, third place, fourth place, there's only really two divisions where the second place team really stinks, and it's the Packers division, and I think it's the Bucks division.
Yeah.
But people are still obsessed with the Saints, so you never know what Sean Payton. And I do think the Panthers are better, and people are giving them credit for it. But I do think Bucks and Packers to win the division is as easy as this is going to get. Bills probably, except for the fact that the Dolphins and Patriots are going to be battling for wild card spots. I just think, nobody in the NFC North is going to make the playoffs except for the Green Bay Packers. The Packers could win that with 9 wins.
Yes. No, hey, we'll wrap it. We're running short on time. Maybe we'll try to figure out something where we can come back and do some player props next week. But hey, man, I appreciate you. These awesome bets, guys. Take advantage of this. Win yourself some money. You can thank us later. David, I appreciate you so much. Do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, if you go to ESPN Chalk, ESPN.com/Chalk, we're going to have our college football preview material going to start next Wednesday. Our golf stuff is up now. MMA stuff is up. We're going to start putting our preview stuff up there next Wednesday for college football, and then the following week for some NFL content. So the next 3 weeks will be loaded on ESPN Chalk, and check me out at Twitter at @DBearmanESPN, because all the material gets sent out there as well. Not only the articles, but nuggets from time to time. You'll see a lot of interesting stuff, not only on sports betting, the Dolphins, the Gators, and of course, my two goofy kids I like to make fun of a lot on Twitter. So,
hey, I appreciate you taking the time. Definitely check it out, guys. I mean, who doesn't like to win money? I'm a degenerate gambler, so I'm all on it. I'll be there checking out everything. So again, David, I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us here on the Sports Muse. And guys, if you like the episode, click like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We just hit 1,700 subs, so help me continue to grow. And I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time.